So in this video, I want to talk all about NATO, what to expect at the upcoming NATO conference, and what is going on with NATO. Why are they increasingly slow walking aid to Ukraine or talking about a bridge to membership rather than guaranteed membership, and why? Okay, let's first look at a timeline of key events related to NATO-Ukraine relations. 1991, the Soviet Union is dissolved. Now remember, NATO was designed to be a buffer or a deterrent to Soviet aggression, and Russia is the inheritor of the Soviet state, and it's still aggressing. So NATO is precisely designed to counter a threat like what Russia is in Ukraine right now. Okay, Soviet Union's dissolved. 1994, you have the Budapest Memorandum. The Ukrainians give away all of their nukes. They get guarantees from the UK, the United States, and Russia that their sovereign borders will be defended or maintained. 1997, which is kind of ironic that Russia was one of the guarantors and they're the aggressor now. 1997, NATO-Ukraine Commission is established, and so they're thinking about what they're going to do. In April of 2008, Ukraine requests a membership application, and they're denied at the Bucharest summit. But hey, one day you'll join NATO was the message that came out of that. That caught Vladimir Putin's ears, and he was now set on a course toward maybe we're going to do something here about taking back this Ukraine if they start departing anywhere from our sphere of influence. And it was the French and the Germans that were opposing NATO membership at this time. 2014, after the Maidan Revolution, Russia annexes Crimea. NATO's pledge for 2% GDP spending on defense happened at that time in Wales, and they still haven't lived up to it. At this point, only 23 out of the 30 some odd nations have actually spent 2% of their GDP on defense. February 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. You're well aware of that, and they wouldn't have been invaded had they been a NATO nation. And so this big gap between 2008 and 2014, that's what caused where we are right now. Ukraine formally submits a NATO application in September of 2022. NATO-Ukraine Council is established in 2023. Have they been invited, or are they going to be invited to be a member? Not in July in the 75th anniversary meeting. Okay, but NATO allies have agreed to fund military aid for Ukraine with $40 billion next year. A Western European diplomat told Reuters on Wednesday, 1 week before the alliance leaders are set to meet in Washington. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg had asked member states to keep up military aid for Ukraine at the same level as in the years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, adding up to some 40 billion euros or 43 billion US dollars per year. NATO leaders will sign off on the pledge next week in Washington. Well, that's a pittance compared to NATO membership. That's not, it's hardly a consolation prize, and this is my frustration with them. The EU has proven to be somewhat of a false friend. The US has been proved to be somewhat of a false friend, slow-walking munitions to Ukraine when they should be giving them what they need to be able to defend themselves, but oh, we don't want to give that. What if we cross one of Putin's red lines? Okay, so you can tell I'm a little hot about this. At the risk of causing alliance division, now it gets even worse. It's not even just that they're just going to give them the consolation prize of here's 40 million. Listen to this. At the risk of causing alliance division, NATO allies will postpone discussion on increased defense spending to a new 2.5 GDP minimum target until 2025 Netherlands summit, one of Estonia's top defense officials says. Okay, so if you really want to give Trump ammunition to have a reason to want to leave NATO or reduce the role of the United States in NATO, do that. Postpone them actually increasing their, taking the military burden on themselves in Europe for what's going on in Europe. That's exactly the wrong tack. They should be doing this immediately to show that they are all in, but they're not doing it. Okay, so here, former President Donald Trump is considering a deal with the Russian President Putin that would block Ukraine's NATO membership, according to sources familiar with the thinking inside Trump's inner circle. This comes from a Political article, and I'll show you a paragraph about it. I'm going to speak about that in my three big stories tonight because it's a very, very long article, but I'll give you a little taste of what's to come. Okay, in the meantime, Ukraine is not ready to compromise with Russia, so Trump can say all he wants that he's going to make them them sit down at the table, but Trump only gets one say. Ukraine also gets a say as well. Ukraine's not ready to compromise with Russia and give up any territory for the sake of ending the war. This was stated by Andrew Yermak, commenting on former U.S. President Donald Trump's statements that he could quickly put an end to the war. Okay, again, Trump likes to say he's a deal maker, and I'm going to sit them down, and I'm going to make this deal, and it'll be terrific. And, well, terrific will mean that Ukraine's going to lose part of its territory, and Russia will then stop. But there will be no reparations as a consequence of that kind of terrific deal. Okay. NATO will request, now this is the worst part of this, NATO will request additional steps from Kyiv before progressing with membership talks. I think this is a move to slow walk the process. I can't be sure. This is only what my gut tells me. I don't have any insider information. According to a senior U.S. State Department official, this position will be outlined in the NATO communique at the annual summit on July 9th. While recognizing Ukraine's reform efforts over the past 2 years, the official emphasized the need for further steps, particularly in anti-corruption, which remains a priority for many NATO members. Okay, and this comes from a Telegraph article, Ukraine to be told that it's too corrupt to join NATO. That's what's going to come down the line here for this next meeting. Ukraine will be told it's too corrupt to join NATO in a major blow to Volodymyr Zelensky. The alliance will request additional steps from Kyiv before membership talks progress, a senior U.S. official in the State Department has said. The position will be set out in writing in the NATO communique signed on July 9th. We have to step back and applaud everything that Ukraine has done in the name of reforms over the last 2+ years, the official told the Telegraph. As they continue to make those reforms, we want to commend them. We want to talk about additional steps that need to be taken, particularly in the area of anti-corruption. It's a priority for many of us around the table, the source added. Now, they're just slow-walking it. That's what's happening here. They're slow-walking it, and Ukraine will not become part of NATO anytime soon. In fact, the Germans have said that it might be 30 years. I mean, that's what we're really looking at. There was a political article I'm going to be talking about in my 3 big stories tonight. Trump's plan for NATO is emerging, and I only want to talk about, it's a very long article, I only want to talk about one paragraph right here. The U.S. has stepped up its central role in NATO since the war began, but Trump's inner circle is now considering making a deal with Putin, okay, on what kind of deal? On which countries could join NATO. Which countries could join NATO? Why would he be agreeing on that with Putin, particularly Ukraine and Georgia? So throw Ukraine and Georgia under the bus in order to get a peace plan? Is that what's likely to happen? It's possible. This is only possible. It's not necessarily, but wow. Such a plan would scuttle NATO's vague promise of future membership to Ukraine. You know, your whole purpose of existing NATO is to thwart Soviet, now Russian, aggression. It's the same stuff. That is the reason that you exist. Everything else is secondary. A policy that Biden has continued, albeit without committing to a timeline. Commit to a timeline. Make this happen. But they're not willing to do it, and so Ukraine will suffer as a consequence. I'm just beside myself that this is where we are, and that particularly when I saw this article here that they're going to be told they're too corrupt to join NATO because they've been making strides headlong the right direction as a fledgling democracy in a time of war, and I'm angry as a hornet. By the way, 2 more things. First thing is I'm going to be talking about that full article tonight in my 3 big stories, and it'll take a while to work through that. And the second thing is if you are a YouTube member, like your membership, or a Patreon patron, I'm going to have a special live stream, I think on Saturday. I'll put these out to all members and patrons, a special live stream just to answer your questions, just to say thank you for being members and patrons. I really appreciate it. Okay, thank you for the time, thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.